Welcome to our Neurodiversity Scholar Series with Zosha Zaks. For this talk, I've asked Zosha to answer the question, what are models of disability and why are they important? My name is Amy Accardo. I'm from the Center for Neurodiversity at Rowan University. We're a cultural center within our Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Welcome, Zosha. It would be terrific if you could begin by sharing a little about yourself and then hop right into our question, what are models of disability and why are they important?
Thank you, Amy. So a little bit about me. I'm an autistic adult. I was diagnosed in my 30s. My professional background is as a certified rehabilitation counselor, and I have worked with autistic teenagers and adults for about 20 years. Right now, I'm working a lot with businesses and organizations and schools to create neurodiversity friendly environments. And I also teach disability studies courses. And one of the things that we look at in disability studies is models of disability. So I'm very excited to share a little bit about models today. The first question is, what is a model? Well, a model is essentially, it's a mental map of something. And it really shapes everything that we do, how we think about something. The thing is, they're implicit. Okay? Most people don't walk around saying, what model am I using today? It's just in our minds and in the way that we're operating in society. And it's so embedded that it just seems the right way that things are. It just seems to be the truth. When a model is disproven or shifts, we see huge changes throughout society. An excellent example is models of Earth. So well until the 1400s in Europe, people thought the Earth was flat and you could kind of fall off the edge. So nobody sailed very far from shore. They were worried they could fall off. Countries didn't create enormous navies. Most trade happened on land. You know, children did not grow up dreaming of being sailors. The shipping industry was very basic. Suddenly, when we discovered, okay, it's round, or perhaps rediscovered is more appropriate, when we realized, okay, it's round and you can't fall off. So everybody switched to a round Earth model, and suddenly the whole world changed. Now trade was going all over the world via ocean. Countries had enormous navies. Boat technology took off. The shipping industry took off. You know, tons of people wanted to be sailors. So very different and very quick, very rapid change because the models shifted. The thing is, as I said, it's implicit. Nobody walked around saying, gee, today I'm using a flat Earth model. It just was the way that things were. And then when that changed, today, I don't typically walk around during the day and say, I'm using a round Earth model. It just is the way that we think about the Earth. So we do have disability models too, and disability models really lay out the way that society is thinking about disability. It's shaping what we do about disability. It impacts how we treat disabled people, and it's really the basis where a lot of those implicit assumptions form and gel. Disability models are really important because when we think about the models, like I just gave an example with, you know, the model of Earth, it really does impact so much in society. And I'll be giving a few examples in just a moment. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people bring this up to a conscious level and really consider what models we're using and why, because that's how we can make really good socially just choices. There's many disability models. For example, there's what's typically called the religious model of disability, and that's when disability is thought of as a punishment for sinning, either in this life or a past life. We don't see that one too much in the United States. The human rights model is the one that's really used by the United Nations. So their basic operating assumption is that disabled people deserve human rights. And so they operate from that position. In the United States, we've really seen Again, this is not exclusive. There are other ones, but the big three that we really see here in the United States are the medical model, the social model, and the neurodiversity model. So those are the ones that I'm going to talk about today. The medical model position is that disability is a big problem. It's tragic. We have to fix the disabled person. We have to find a cure and get them to be as normal as possible. The social model says, well, disability is really caused by barriers. And if we remove the barriers, then disabled people can do the things they want to do. So let's focus on changing society. The neurodiversity model, which is kind of the newest hit on the block, is taking a totally new look at disability and saying, hey, you know, disability is a natural diversity, and this diversity actually has a role to play in human systems. So that's a totally, you know, new emerging way to look at disability. And you can see how the different models result in different consequences. So if we're using a medical model and we're positioning the idea that disability is this abnormality that we have to cure and we have to fix it, and we got to get the disabled person to be more normal. As a result, we've seen a lot of stigma. Okay, disability becomes stigmatized. And then also you can see how it impacts what society does and the kind of decisions we make. So if we have a pile of money and we're going to do some research and we're operating from a medical model, well, we're going to use the money to find some cures. That's what we're going to do with it. If we switch and we're using a social model and we're like, no, the real problem for disabled people is all these barriers, not that they're different. So we're going to run around and remove barriers and change society and provide a lot of accommodations, right? That's the real focus. So now if I have that pile of money again, what am I going to do? If I'm operating in a social model, I'm going to use that money to get rid of the barriers and provide those accommodations that disabled people need. So that's how these disability models really impact every layer of society. Now we're sort of seeing a shift to the neurodiversity model. And that, like I said a second ago, it operates from the assumption that disability is a natural diversity and that these traits are important even when it's frustrating. And so we're going to be emphasizing full inclusion a lot more, and we're going to be working on destigmatizing, because if it's a natural difference, then there's no shame in it. I want to emphasize that the medical model does not mean medicine and therapy. In a way, the medical model has a kind of confusing name. It should really be called the normalization model, but it got called the medical model because it was done in healthcare settings. And the idea, again, was to normalize disabled people. We can provide drugs, therapy, and healthcare as accommodations to help disabled people take care of themselves, live their lives, reach their potential, go to school, achieve all the things that they want to do. So that's the distinction. And I really want to be clear on that. So we're not saying medicine is bad or therapy is bad or different kinds of healthcare options are bad. Okay, we want to provide that. The issue is how and why are we providing it? And that's the models in the background. So if I'm providing this healthcare or this medication because I'm trying desperately to make you as normal as possible, that feels very differently than if I'm providing you with different kinds of healthcare options so that you can take care of yourself and live your life as the person you are. The other point here that I want to emphasize is that, again, the medical model really stresses that normalization paradigm and says that if a disabled person can't become normal or can't get themselves to be normal, that's their problem. They're just going to have to cope. Whereas the social model really sees it as society having a responsibility to be fair, to provide equal access, to give everyone the same opportunities. And so we do have a responsibility to provide the accommodations that make that happen, including healthcare. So that's, again, a very different approach. Some social model accommodations everybody can think of, architectural or physical. For example, if we have a ramp going into the building, Some environmental accommodations are very helpful for neurodivergent people. For example, if you can put lights on dimmers. You know, sometimes there's accommodations, but people may not have thought of them yet as accommodations. For example, if we give a student extended time on a test, that really is a scheduling accommodation. So lots of accommodations. One accommodation that's really, really important that you can't see is what I call attitudinal accommodations. And that's when we change disabled, non-disabled people's attitudes about disabled people. So in essence, we are still changing society. We're changing you. We're not necessarily changing a building, but we're changing you and your attitudes. And the reason why I think that that's so important is because oftentimes it's what I call attitudinal barriers that really stand in the way of people, you know, with different disabilities of different sorts. You know, for example, let's say somebody is non-speaking and they're in high school. You know, non-disabled people may just automatically assume that that type of person wouldn't go to college. You know, so that's what I mean. We change your attitudes, and that opens up opportunities for disabled people. You can see disability models operating in society now that I've pointed it out to you consciously. So for example, here on the far left is a picture of a public bus in Seattle, and there's a bus ad all over the outside of the bus. And it says, let's wipe out cancer, diabetes, and autism in his lifetime. And that's from Seattle Children's Hospital in 2013. And so you've seen here that autism is being positioned as an illness or a disease, and we want to find cures for it. Right? We want to get rid of it if we could. That's a medical model approach. In the middle, you see a red banner, and it says real movies for real needs. And on a film strip, you see an icon of an eye, an ear, and a heart. And it says lights up, volume down, hearts open. And on the left side of the banner is the logo for Marcus Theaters. This is a banner for sensory safe movies. This is the social model in operation. We didn't change the disabled people coming to the movies, we changed the theater. Right, so that's an accommodation. We changed the theater around. Okay, we didn't change the disabled people at all. We just changed the lights, we changed the volume, and we changed our attitudes. That's what the heart is about. Okay, we're not judgmental, we're open-minded, we're welcoming of these people who are different. On the far right, you see just a clip of Microsoft's neurodiversity hiring initiative website. And what that's about is that's that shift to the neurodiversity model. And it says opening doors to autistic talent. So what some companies are realizing is that autistic people may be able to contribute out of their differences. And so we're beginning to value autistic traits. So these are the models in operation, and you can see them. You can see them out in society. So what do models of disability look like on campus? I have two cases here that I'll share. In the first case, we have a student named Bao who's dyslexic and also has a significant speech impediment. And if we look over here, there's a chart of the models and what the different approaches might be. So I encourage you to think about how each model might impact Bao and his self-esteem, his outlook, his success. You know, medical model approach would try very hard to get Bao to communicate in a normal way, whatever it is that society is saying is the normal way to communicate. The social model approach gives Bao accommodations, for example, a communication device. The neurodiversity model, this is that new approach that's coming along now. The neurodiversity model would say, well, let's see, maybe Bao wants to innovate new ways of communicating that we may not have even discovered yet, which would be beneficial for everybody. I want to emphasize that, you know, taking a social model or neurodiversity model approach does not mean that Bao would never go see a speech language pathologist. What we're just saying is we're switching what we're doing and why. So in the past, professionals, like I said, would focus on normalization. Instead, now they have this opportunity to focus on accommodations and innovation instead, which self-advocates have told us has much more higher chance of succeeding, because self-advocates have told us that that emphasis on normalization really puts a lot of pressure on people, and it doesn't feel good. Here's another example of the models of disability on campus. We have an example of Valen, who's an autistic college student, and they have an autism-related special interest in the history of dance. A lot of times, individuals on the autism spectrum have a special interest in a certain topic. So Valen discusses this topic all the time, even in the middle of class. She's turning in work on the history of dance instead of the assignment that might be due. And so on the right, I have a chart of different models. And again, I'm asking people, which model or models of disability do you think are going to be the most helpful to Valen in the long run? Medical model approach would try to get her to stop the special interest and, focus on what she's supposed to do and converse like quote unquote normal college students instead of just going on and on about the history of dance all the time. Social model, again, we're thinking about those accommodations. So maybe a teacher could give her dedicated time to explore her interest in office hours after class. And so, that might also reduce the issue of, perhaps, if there's some disruption or distraction in class. We could also make attitudinal accommodations and decide, okay, Valen is not weird, they're just different. So that's important too, to think about those attitudinal accommodations, because that's going to impact how we approach this person and how we work with them. Neurodiversity model would see this trait and again wants to value these traits. So we could, for example, help her join the Dance Historians Association of America student champion. Maybe we could get her to create a special course on dance history and learn how to teach it. Maybe she could do an independent project on the history of dance. And when we honor people's traits and we respect their differences and we see these traits as valuable, even when it's frustrating, oftentimes what happens, when you feel like you're in a better place and you're being respected and honored for who you are, some of the things that may have been harder, for example, class time, that sometimes can become easier because people are finding avenues where they can express this talent and this interest in healthy and appropriate ways. So these are the different ways that models operate. But again, like I said, it's implicit. What I'm doing here is I'm bringing it up to the surface so that you can be part of, making conscious choices about how we want to approach this difference that we're seeing. Okay, so in summary, again, I think allies have an important opportunity to help us move away from the medical model because of all the negative impacts that emphasis of normalization has had on people. We've been primarily using a social model over the last 3 decades, including attitudinal accommodations. Like I said, we're now seeing a paradigm shift to the neurodiversity model. And I think that that's very exciting. And allies and self-advocates have an opportunity to move society in this direction. Neurodiversity model is always going to work with social model. Accommodations are great, but the neurodiversity model is asking us and inviting us to go beyond just accommodating disability and really value these traits for what this diversity can bring to our communities.
Thank you so much, Zosha, for this important content. I'm left reflecting on how models of disability are implicit, but also thinking about how when we make them explicit, there's such a social justice impact, right? So perhaps you could speak to that a little bit, and if you do recommend or have any suggestions for if we should be doing more than videos like this to help make these models explicit on our college campuses so we can have some additional reflection to help us move toward the neurodiversity, model and positive attitudinal accommodations?
Sure, I do think there's a lot we could do in, the curricula on college campuses. For example, if you're teaching history, if you're teaching English, whatever you're teaching, you can bring, for example, in history, I mentioned this in one of the earlier videos. We forget that the longest and most successful sit-in in the United States was disabled activists protesting at Health and Human Services to get that 1973 law into effect, which provided accommodations. So I think there's a lot that we can teach, and bringing these models to the surface can help frame what we're discussing and what we're talking about. And I do think it does tie very tightly to social justice initiatives. And it's part of, I think, in a broader way, even beyond just disability, in general, our society these days is asking these critical questions. What kind of world do we want to create? And that involves bringing the implicit up so we can examine it and make choices about it.
Thank you so much. And thank you just overall for working with us to create this series of videos around neurodiversity. The other video briefs with Zosha are available on our Center for Neurodiversity website and our YouTube channel. Just search Rowan University Center for Neurodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you.